There is a strange tremor that runs through your body when you sense something approaching from within, something you cannot name yet cannot ignore. You feel it in the pauses between thoughts, in the weight of dreams that linger past morning, in the unexplainable restlessness that wakes you at 3 in the morning with your heart racing for no apparent reason. This is not anxiety about tomorrow's tasks or next month's uncertainties. This is something older, deeper, rising from a place inside you that has been silent for too long. What comes next cannot be stopped because it is already here, moving beneath the surface of your carefully constructed life. It is not a future event you can prepare for with plans and strategies. It is a reckoning with what you have buried, denied, postponed. And your soul, that patient witness to every compromise you made with yourself, is finally demanding its due. The preparation Jung spoke of was never about fortifying your defenses. It was about learning to surrender to what seeks to emerge through you, to recognize that the greatest danger lies not in what approaches, but in your continued resistance to it. What unfolds in the coming moments of your inner life will reshape everything you thought you knew about who you are. You have felt it building for months, perhaps years, those sudden flashes of anger that seem disproportionate to their trigger, the hollow feeling after accomplishing what you once desperately wanted, the relationships that suddenly feel like costumes you can no longer wear. Your unconscious has been sending signals, dropping clues, creating disruptions designed to wake you from the trance of your conditioned existence. But the mind, loyal to its patterns, keeps finding explanations that allow you to continue as before. Until it doesn't. Until the day you realize that continuing as before has become more painful than the unknown territory of change. This is when the real preparation begins, not as an act of will, but as an act of recognition. You see that what is coming is not an invader from outside, but a part of yourself that refused to stay exiled any longer. Jung understood that the psyche operates by its own laws, follows its own timing. When you have repressed something long enough, when you have pushed down your authentic responses to life in favor of acceptable ones, when you have traded your truth for belonging, the unconscious does not simply forget. It gathers strength in the darkness. It waits for the moment when your conscious defenses are weakened by exhaustion, by crisis, by the simple accumulation of unlived life. What you feel approaching is the return of everything you sacrificed to become who others needed you to be. The rage you swallowed to keep peace. The desire you denied to remain virtuous. The wild creative impulse you tamed to fit into professional boxes. The grief you never allowed yourself to fully feel, because there was always someone else's needs demanding your attention. All of it, waiting just beneath the threshold of awareness, ready to flood through the cracks in your composure. Have you noticed how your dreams have changed? How they carry a quality of urgency, of warning, of revelation? How they show you versions of yourself behaving in ways your waking mind would never permit? The dream space is where your unconscious rehearses what it intends to bring into your daylight world. Those disturbing images, those impossible scenarios, those encounters with parts of yourself you don't recognize. They are not random neurological firings. They are messages from the depths, preparing you for the integration that must come. Pay attention to the recurring symbols, the house with rooms you have never entered, the water that rises and threatens to drown you or carries you toward unknown shores, the animals that pursue or guide you, the strangers with familiar eyes. Each image is a piece of the puzzle your unconscious is assembling, a fragment of the truth you need to see but cannot yet bear to look at directly. Jung spent decades working with dreams, understanding them as the natural language of the psyche, the way the unconscious communicates what the conscious mind refuses to hear. He taught that dreams compensate for the one-sidedness of consciousness. If you are too rigid in waking life, your dreams will show you chaos. If you are too scattered, they will present structure. If you deny your anger, dreams will bring violence. If you suppress your desire, dreams will overflow with sexuality. This compensatory function is not punishment, it is correction. Your psyche is always working toward wholeness, even when your conscious self is committed to remaining fragmented. The dreams you cannot forget, the ones that stay with you long after waking, these carry the most urgent messages. They are showing you what must be integrated, what can no longer be ignored, what is demanding your conscious attention. The persona you constructed, that carefully curated presentation of self that earned you approval and safety, it served its purpose. It protected you when you were too young to defend your authentic nature. It helped you navigate systems that demanded conformity. It allowed you to survive in environments that could not hold your full complexity. But personas, like shells, can become prisons when we forget we are not the mask, but the living being beneath it. You learned early what expressions were safe and which invited punishment or withdrawal of love. You discovered which parts of yourself earned praise and which provoked disapproval or confusion. Slowly, methodically, you built a version of yourself that could get your needs met, even if it meant hiding your genuine responses. This was survival intelligence. As a child, you had no choice. Belonging was not optional. You did what you had to do. But you are no longer that child, even though the strategies persist. You are no longer dependent on those who required your conformity for survival. Yet the habit of hiding, of performing, of checking your authentic responses against an internalized audience before allowing them expression, this habit has calcified into your identity. You have worn the mask so long you almost believe you are the mask. Almost. Because something in you knows better. Something remembers what it felt like before you learned to hide. Before you discovered that certain feelings were unacceptable. Before you understood that your natural way of being would not be welcomed. That something is stirring now, pushing against the constraints, demanding recognition, refusing to remain silent. There comes a point when the energy required to maintain the false self exceeds the energy you have available. This is not weakness. This is your psyche's wisdom, withdrawing support from what is not genuinely you, redirecting that vital force toward what seeks to be born. The exhaustion you feel is not a problem to be solved with better self-care routines. It is a message. Stop feeding what is dying. Turn your attention toward what is trying to live. What terrifies you most about what is coming is not the external change, but the internal revelation. You are afraid of discovering that you have been lying to yourself about fundamental things, that the relationship you defended is actually suffocating you, that the career you built is someone else's dream you inhabited, that the version of yourself you present to the world is so far from your essence that you sometimes cannot remember who you were before you learned to perform. This fear is appropriate. You should be afraid of that discovery because it means everything must be reconsidered. But greater than that fear should be your growing awareness that living in the lie has become unbearable. You can feel it in your body, the way certain situations make your stomach turn, the way certain conversations drain you completely, the way certain routines feel like slow death. Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who you actually are, rather than who you were conditioned to be. It is not a comfortable process. It does not promise happiness or peace in any conventional sense. What it offers is something more essential: authenticity, wholeness, the integration of your shadow and your light into a unified being that can stand in the world without apology or pretense. The shadow, that repository of all your rejected qualities, is not your enemy. It is the storehouse of your unlived life, your unadmitted desires, your forbidden strengths. What you exiled to the unconscious did not disappear. It continued to exist, to grow, to demand recognition. And because you would not look at it directly, it had to make itself known through projection, through symptoms, through the sudden eruptions that seem to come from nowhere, but actually come from the sealed chambers of your inner world. You see your shadow most clearly in what you cannot tolerate in others. The selfishness that enrages you, the weakness that disgusts you, the intensity that makes you uncomfortable. These are not random judgments. They are mirrors showing you what you have disowned in yourself. The generous person who cannot stand greed has buried their own healthy self-interest. The controlled person who despises messiness has rejected their own chaos. The rational mind that mocks emotion has abandoned its own feeling nature. What is coming is the collapse of these divisions, the return of the exiled parts, the integration of what you split off to survive. And this cannot be stopped, because your psyche, in its deeper intelligence, knows that you have reached the limits of what fragmentation can sustain. You have become too divided to function, too split to feel whole, too defended to experience genuine connection. The death you are sensing is not literal. It is the death of the false self, the constructed identity, the persona that has run your life from behind the scenes. And like all deaths, it brings grief. You may find yourself mourning the person you thought you were, the life you thought you had, the future you imagined based on false premises. This grief is sacred. Do not rush through it. Do not try to replace what is dying with a new version of the same lie. In the space that opens when the old self dies, there is nothing at first. A vast emptiness, a terrifying absence of familiar structures. The mind panics in this void. It wants to immediately fill the space with new identities, new projects, new relationships that will restore the feeling of solid ground. But the void is not the problem. The void is the womb of your becoming. You cannot know yet who you are on the other side of this dissolution. That is the point. You have spent your entire life trying to know, to define, to control your own becoming. What approaches now is the necessity of not knowing, of allowing your emergence rather than engineering it. This requires a kind of trust that feels foolish to the rational mind, a willingness to let the unconscious guide the process of your transformation. Time itself begins to feel different in these liminal spaces. Days that should pass quickly stretch into eternities of introspection. Nights that should bring rest become portals into other dimensions of your psyche. The ordinary markers of progress cease to apply. You cannot measure where you are in this journey by external achievements or social milestones. The only measurement that matters is the growing alignment between your outer life and your inner truth. Why does this acceleration happen now? Why do some people live entire lifetimes without ever facing this crisis, while others feel it descending upon them with such urgency? Jung would say it has to do with the unique demands of your particular soul, the specific task you were born to accomplish. When you have strayed too far from your essential nature, when the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be has grown too wide, the psyche intervenes with increasing force. The symptoms intensify. The dreams become more vivid, more demanding. The synchronicities multiply, those meaningful coincidences that feel like the universe is trying to get your attention. The breakdowns become more frequent. Your carefully maintained composure cracks more easily. All of this is not punishment, it is correction. Your deeper self creating the conditions necessary for transformation. You have always known this moment would arrive. Not consciously, perhaps, but in that quiet place beneath thought where your soul has been keeping track. There was a knowing, a strange certainty that one day you would have to stop pretending, stop performing, stop living according to scripts written by others. That day has come. What you do with this knowing determines everything. Some people, when this moment arrives, fight it with every resource they have. They double down on their defenses. They seek therapies that promise to restore their previous equilibrium. They blame external circumstances for their internal crisis. This resistance is understandable. What is being asked of you is enormous. To let your known world dissolve, to release your grip on certainty, to allow yourself to be unmade so that something more genuine can emerge. But resistance, while natural, ultimately fails. You cannot outrun your own unconscious. You cannot think your way out of a transformation that requires your surrender. The only question is whether you will resist until you are broken, or whether you can find the courage to consciously participate in your own undoing. The preparation Jung spoke of is this: learning to distinguish between the voice of fear and the voice of wisdom. Fear tells you to defend, to control, to prevent change at all costs. Wisdom tells you to observe, to allow, to trust the intelligence of the process even when you cannot see where it leads. Fear wants guarantees. Wisdom accepts mystery. When you stop resisting what is coming, something remarkable happens. The very thing that terrified you begins to reveal its gift. The rage you were afraid to feel becomes the energy you need to set boundaries and claim your life. The vulnerability you tried to hide becomes the bridge to genuine intimacy. The chaos you worked so hard to suppress becomes the creative force that reshapes your existence according to your true nature. This is the paradox at the heart of individuation. What you must become is not something foreign that will be imposed upon you. It is what you have always been beneath the layers of conditioning, beneath the compromises and adaptations, beneath the fear-driven choices that took you further and further from your center. The return to yourself feels like a journey into the unknown only because you have been lost for so long. Your body has been trying to tell you this truth for years. The tension you carry in your shoulders, the tightness in your chest, the exhaustion that rest does not relieve, these are not random physical complaints. They are the somatic signatures of a life lived out of alignment with your soul's truth. When you finally begin to move toward integration, to reclaim your shadow, to live from your authentic center, the body responds. The chronic pain eases, the energy returns, the breath deepens. What cannot be stopped is already in motion. The question is not whether you will transform, but how consciously you will participate in the transformation. Will you meet what rises from your depths with curiosity or with condemnation? Will you allow the dismantling of false structures, or will you exhaust yourself trying to hold together what must fall apart? Will you trust the wisdom of your psyche, or will you insist that your conscious mind knows better? There is a moment in every genuine transformation where you must choose to let go of the shore without seeing the other side, where you must release your grip on what you know without any promise of what comes next. This is the moment of faith, not in any external deity, but in the self-regulating intelligence of your own psyche, in the movement toward wholeness that operates whether you understand it or not. The freedom that waits on the other side of this surrender is not the freedom to do whatever you want. It is the freedom to be who you actually are, to move through the world without the constant vigilance required to maintain a false front, to respond to life from your genuine feelings rather than from learned scripts, to discover that you have resources you never knew existed because they were buried beneath the weight of who you were supposed to be. Think about the small moments when the mask slips, when you forget to perform, and something genuine escapes. A laugh that is too loud for the room. A truth you speak before your filter catches it. A response that comes from your depths rather than your conditioning. These moments terrify you because they reveal how different you are from the person you have been pretending to be. But they also thrill you, because in those unguarded instants you remember what it feels like to be real. Jung recognized that we spend the first half of life building an ego, a sense of self that can navigate the social world. We learn the rules, we adopt the masks, we develop the skills necessary to belong and succeed. This is not wrong. It is necessary. But what works in the first half of life becomes a prison in the second half. The very strategies that helped you survive and achieve begin to suffocate the soul that was meant to fully express itself. The midlife crisis, that cliché that popular culture mocks, is actually a sacred threshold. It marks the moment when the unconscious demands a reckoning, when the unlived life refuses to remain silent any longer. This is why it often manifests as irrational behavior from the outside. The successful professional who abandons their career. The devoted parent who suddenly needs to be alone. The reliable partner who can no longer suppress their true desires. From the outside, it looks like collapse. From the inside, it feels like the only honest thing you have ever done. What you are being asked to integrate is not just your shadow, though that is crucial. You are also being asked to reclaim your anima or animus, those contra-sexual aspects of the psyche that carry qualities your conscious persona has rejected. If you have spent your life being strong, rational, and independent, your anima holds the softness, intuition, and interdependence you needed to survive but pushed away. If you have lived primarily through feeling, nurturing, and adapting, Your animus carries the assertion, logic, and autonomy that frightened you into compliance. These rejected aspects do not disappear simply because you refuse to acknowledge them. They live in your unconscious, influencing your choices in ways you cannot see. They appear in your dreams as figures of the opposite sex who fascinate or threaten you. They show up in your attractions, drawing you toward people who embody what you have denied in yourself. They create the very conflicts you keep encountering, the same patterns playing out in different relationships, different jobs, different cities, because the issue is not out there but in here. The integration of these split-off parts is not about becoming balanced in some bland, middle-ground way. It is about becoming whole, which means containing contradictions without collapsing, being both strong and vulnerable, both independent and deeply connected, both rational and intuitive, both light and shadow. This is the gold Jung spoke of, the philosopher's stone of transformation. Not perfection, but integration. Not resolution, but the capacity to hold tension without fragmenting. You may notice as this process unfolds that your tolerance for superficiality diminishes. Conversations that once satisfied you now feel empty. Relationships based on shared activities rather than genuine intimacy begin to feel hollow. Entertainment that once distracted you from your inner life now seems like a waste of precious time. This is not you becoming difficult or antisocial. This is your psyche asserting its priorities, demanding depth over breadth, meaning over comfort, truth over pleasantness. Some relationships will not survive this shift. People who related to your persona will not recognize the more authentic being emerging. They may feel betrayed by your change, as if you broke an unspoken contract to remain who you were when they met you. Their discomfort is not your responsibility to fix. You cannot betray yourself to preserve their image of you. This is one of the hardest truths of individuation. Not everyone will come with you into your becoming. But other relationships, the ones rooted in something deeper than shared pretense, will transform alongside you. When you drop your mask, you give others permission to drop theirs. When you speak your truth, you create space for others to do the same. The connections that survive your transformation become richer, more honest, more capable of holding the full reality of who you both are. These are the relationships worth keeping. The process is not linear. You will have days when you feel you are making progress, when clarity emerges, and you can see the path forward. Then you will have days when you feel you have lost everything, when the old self is gone, but the new self has not yet appeared. These oscillations are normal. The psyche does not transform in a straight line. It spirals, revisiting the same themes at deeper levels, circling around the core wound, the essential truth, the fundamental question of who you are beneath all the layers. During these cycles, you may find yourself drawn to practices and experiences you once dismissed. Meditation, not as a stress management technique, but as a way to meet the silence within. Ritual, not as superstition, but as a way to mark transitions and honor thresholds. Dreams, not as random noise, but as messages from the depths that require your attention. Art, music, poetry, not as entertainment, but as languages that speak to parts of you that words cannot reach. Jung understood that the psyche is naturally religious, meaning it seeks connection to something greater than the ego, something that transcends the limited conscious perspective. This is not about adopting any particular faith or belief system. It is about recognizing that you are part of something larger, that your individual transformation is woven into a collective transformation, that your journey toward wholeness serves not just you, but the whole. What cannot be stopped is not just your personal crisis. It is a collective awakening happening through individual souls, courageous enough to face their own depths. Every person who chooses consciousness over comfort, authenticity over approval, contributes to a shift in the larger field. Your willingness to integrate your shadow makes it easier for others to face theirs. Your courage to live from your truth gives others permission to do the same.
This is why the work is so difficult. You are not just changing your own life. You are challenging the collective agreements that keep everyone pretending, performing, living from fear rather than love. The resistance you feel is not just internal. It is the weight of systems and structures that depend on your continued compliance, on your agreement to remain small, safe, controllable.
But you are no longer willing to be controlled. Something in you has awakened that refuses to go back to sleep. It does not matter how much more comfortable unconsciousness would be, how much easier life was when you could pretend not to know what you know. That option is gone. What you have seen cannot be unseen. What you have felt cannot be unfelt. What you have remembered about your essential nature cannot be forgotten again. What comes next, what you cannot stop, is the birth of your authentic self. And like all births, it involves both death and emergence, both destruction and creation, both loss and discovery. You do not need to know how to navigate this process perfectly. You only need to stop trying to prevent it. The psyche knows its own path. Your task is to step out of the way and allow it to unfold. So be prepared, not with plans and strategies, but with openness and courage. Be prepared to meet the parts of yourself you have spent a lifetime avoiding. Be prepared to grieve the life you thought you would have. Be prepared to discover that beneath all the fear and resistance lies something more real than anything you have known before. Your essential nature, waiting patiently for you to stop running and finally come home. If this journey resonates with you, if you recognize yourself in these words, if you sense that your own transformation is calling, then stay with this exploration. Subscribe to continue this conversation, because the path of becoming whole is not walked alone. Share in the comments what is stirring in your own depths. What can you no longer deny? What is rising that you can no longer suppress? Your voice matters here. Your story is part of the greater story of awakening we are all living through. And perhaps in witnessing each other's courage to face what cannot be stopped, we find the strength to surrender to our own becoming.